This is the Men Refined podcast.
Hey friends, welcome to the Men Refined podcast. I'm your host, Rafael Sifontes, and in this episode, I would like to provide you with some insights about millennials and Gen Z, and how do we reach and teach new adults in 2024. I'm pretty sure that many of us who are in our late 30s, mid 40s, mid-age kind of men are dealing with this new sense of how to deal with this new adulthood that is coming into the workforce that you may have living under your roof. And I have with me a good friend of mine, Chuck Goertzen. Chuck, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thanks, Rafael.
Chuck is working and have been working for many years in college campus. He's part of a nonprofit for how many years?
Well,
are you counting?
As of this month, it's been 30 years.
Okay, so we're talking to somebody who's a professional in this. I am not. I only have a 23-year-old as of now. So I'm very new into this. Tell me, Chuck, what are some of the hot takes that we can see happening and going on in new adulthood now in 2023, 2024, in this season? Because I think that I've seen a big change between what I call BC and AC, which is before COVID and after COVID. Have you seen that change?
Yeah, there's been a change where after COVID, there was obviously a lot more activity online, a lot more technology being used for so many more things. And I would just start off by saying I've noticed that there's probably been more confusion with young people's identity than anything else. So I feel like that could be pretty much the theme of our conversation today.
What do you mean by people's identity? And what exactly are we talking about? Are we talking about identity on who they are as a man, what they're looking for as a man, or and I say men because my mind is shifted in a way that my heart is with young adults, but specifically with men. It's hard for me to say much about, even though we have a hope of how we will like our daughters to be like when they're young adults, or the future wife of my son, right? We have that sense of knowing what will be good and godly, what will be the expectation, I will say. But in my mind is always the man mentality. What are these kids thinking nowadays?
They are thinking that they are uncertain about just themselves and who they are. So therefore, they struggle with self-acceptance, self-assurance. It affects their self-confidence, just in who they are as a person. And I've seen this among young women and young men. Now, my work in my ministry for the last 15 years has been with international students who are studying here in the U.S. And I tend to see more grad level type students and interact with them. So they, at that point, tend to have a little more self-assurance, but they are also working in order to please primarily their parents, and they're trying to do it from afar. So one thing that they deal with and struggle with is pressure. They experience a lot of pressure from their family, because family is one of the things they value most in their life. It's the biggest value on a lot of different levels.
What about the pressure in college? How do they respond to that pressure? Have you seen them responding in any way, or they really don't care about the pressure? You're talking about international students, right?
Right.
I want to touch about, obviously, our very own soon in this conversation, but now that you're in it, is there a difference in there?
I think there is a little difference, but they mix and mingle, because international students come here and one of the first things they're looking for is acceptance by American students. They always say, well, I want to be here to make American friends. and I want to find community with American friends. Oftentimes after 2 months or so, they tend to give up on that goal, give up on that desire, and just focused on their work. They focus on their majors because they're experiencing probably more pressure from home to do well. So they really have to keep up with that. And the other side of it is that the American students are also looking for community themselves. And so they don't always have a lot to offer the international community. So they don't even look or notice them because it's not a priority for them to do so.
Well, they're in college, right? So their priority should be get their classes.
True.
Right?
True.
Go through that, check box. Okay, that's it, and graduate, right?
Yeah.
In that topic, I always think one thing that I hear all the time from people that are getting ready to go to college is that old saying of, I'm looking for the college experience. How does that look for an international student? Is that a shocking aspect of their life once they come into a college right here in the States?
Well, they start off with a big season of transition. And so part of that transition is finding some friends, finding some places where they can fit in. Even that theme of fitting in is experienced by American international students, all of it. The young generation that we have, they go about finding acceptance and a place very differently than we did. They go to social media. A lot of times
we're still talking about international students.
Yeah, we're really talking about international, and we're talking about American students as well. Kind of both.
Yeah.
Because they both go about it in very similar ways. They're using social media to make connections, but they also have to make decisions about what they get involved with and who they get involved with, what clubs and organizations to be a part of, and things like that. And all of that is pressure. It's challenging for them to make those decisions. And so part of our ministry a lot of times is to support them in helping them find their community. We invite them to be a part of our community that highlights social connections. We try to help them make social connections and have spiritual conversations, student leadership opportunities, and then some service projects that they can also get involved in and find community. And a lot of the topics that we talk about are, for example, this next month is February. Hey, it's Love Month, right? So we're going to look at love languages and help them discover maybe they've never looked at what their love languages are. And a lot of them, it might require, and we have love languages tests that they can take. And it might be really interesting for them. So to find out what their tendency is toward how they experience love and how they give love to others.
I tell you what, there's some data that came out in the Atlantic.com, and looking at the broader arc of history, right? Across more than a century, this data pulls from. And there's a different pattern emerges. In the late 1900s, youth achieved the markers of adulthood at ages similar to youth today, which is kind of crazy. So how do you see adulthood in these, international students that come into American colleges? Do you see a difference between the everyday American college kid and these international students? Do they seem that they're more mature than these American students that grew up in America?
I would say they, in some ways, have to be more mature because a little more is required of them personally in just adjusting to life here. For example, they have to work at getting their own Social Security card and number, and it's all on them to try to figure out a way to get a driver's license or to figure out the medical system, the healthcare system here. It's new for them. So there's a lot of things that they have to figure out. And yes, their phones help them do that.
Of course.
But all students go to their phone for information more than anything else.
But what about that mental maturity? Is there a difference between them and us? between?
It doesn't seem like there's a drastic difference. But again, the type of international student that comes and gets here to the U.S. to study, they tend to be some of the sharpest and smartest students from those nations. So they already have accomplished a lot of things. Their grades are good. They're intelligent. Maybe their English is quite good. All of those things help them to actually get here and get to the schools that they want to.
What do you think are their challenges in this season, in these last few years, that they have faced in college, that you've seen and experienced?
I think it's a challenge that's always been there. Trying to get a degree, studying, reading, doing research in a second language has always been a challenge, and that's something that that there will always be. But then trying to understand the culture that they're living in and the differences that are here is also quite challenging for the students.
So for you that have been doing this for so many years, have the method have changed, your approach to reaching these young men? Have the approach changed?
I think one thing that has changed is there tends to be in doing ministry kind of a group mentality. And one of the major changes that I've seen that for me personally is there's very much an individual approach rather than kind of a group and kind of having the group help you along. It's the young people are individuals who are actually trying to figure out themselves. And so there's a real high priority in really, really listening and asking a lot of questions to get to know a person and understand where they're coming from, learn their culture, understand the lenses that they tend to look through. There's a lot of gleaning of information from individuals as opposed to a group.
We had a conversation once, and you mentioned something that struck me to the core, and it was when you were trying to connect with some of these young men. The common denominator is headphones. They all had their headphones on. They all had either their faces down or they were preoccupied, and it was challenging even to trying to have a conversation with anybody just passing by, because everybody has these big headphones now as they walk. In a sense, that is telling you that don't mess with me, don't talk to me, I don't want nothing to do with what's around me. I want to be on my own and I know where I'm going. What do you say to that? How do you tackle that? What are some of the tools that you have utilized through the years to tackle that situation, which we see everywhere pretty much nowadays, even in the work environment? We see everybody's working. They have their headphones. It's like, don't bother me, right? I don't think it's a focused situation that they're in. I don't think it's like they're so concentrated in their work. It's more on the fact that they don't want to be bothered. They don't want nobody to connect with them at a specific time during the day. Does that make sense?
Yep, that totally makes sense. And my approach is I have to remind myself things aren't always the way they look on the outside, because it's like they're protecting themselves from what I'm not really sure. But inside, what I've learned is they still desire to connect. They absolutely desire community and friends.
How do they do it though?
Yeah, how do they do it?
You say they have a desire to connect.
Yeah. That's the
how do you
real
connect
dilemma.
how do you connect with people? You got to put yourself out there. It takes time to connect with somebody. It takes time to have a relationship with anybody in the world. It takes time for me to have a relationship with a certain man. It takes time for me to have a relationship with a certain lady. It takes time to get to know somebody. Between men, it takes even longer because we don't want to put ourselves out there. So what are these kids thinking nowadays? Sorry, I don't want to call them kids, but yes, what are these young adults, men, military age men thinking nowadays? How do you connect if you don't put yourself out there? If you don't give your time and effort into developing some sort of relationship nowadays?
Mm-hmm. There's the desire on the inside to want to be known and to have community. And then there's the other side. There's a fear of not being accepted by others.
Okay.
So it's like a dichotomy. They want to be known and they want community, but they do it through the privacy of technology. They also do it by changing or making a persona through social media that may or may not really be them, but it's so that they can try to be accepted by others. And that's really fascinating to me. And here's the thing that I heard just today. This is really hot. These young people said, because of what we're experiencing, we do not want to raise our children with technology. I was like, what? Did I hear that right? They said, yeah, because it has taught us that we've experienced so much loneliness through technology, even though it's probably still the best way to help us find community, but we don't really know how to interact well once we're in community to continue those relationships.
Because of technology?
Because of technology. So now they're almost seeing technology, obviously, in a negative light, because the way that makes them feel that, and their experience mental health problems, stress, loneliness, anxiety, and technology isn't helping them. And yet, they said technology is what we know, it's what we've been raised with, and so we're all addicted to it. And that has to be something that, people need to be aware of.
Well, there's a bunch of health and well-being impacts of being so much in the technology. And I think that when we're talking about technology, the first thing that comes to our minds is our phones, right?
Right, yeah.
I mean, it's always at reach, always in our hands, always so close to our face, always striving for our attention. And it is technically a sedentary behavior, which sedentary behaviors are bad just because of the nature of. So right there and there, being sedentary is bad for your health. It's bad for your mental health. Hence, that's why we have so many issues with mental health nowadays. It disrupts sleep, our patterns, right? How we sleep, because the amount of time that we spend on our screen. So it's very addictive. So that's a huge concern. And that impacts overall our health. For young adults to now understand that this is a big deal, and they are actually acknowledging that. Like you say, they don't want their kids to have technology, and they're like mid-20s.
Or they don't want to raise their kids with technology. I mean, they're obviously going to have to learn it and be aware of it.
Eventually.
They know that.
Of course. Yeah. But not raise them at a young age.
Yeah.
Right? What does that say?
Well,
are they aware, but not showing it?
They are aware at some level.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I realize that we've been talking quite a bit about some of the negative aspects of their lives, but young people have incredible things to offer. And maybe technology has helped in that way. For example, this last month, we had a service project at a conference, and we had like 750 international students there. We had almost 100 students help with a service project. And it's like, with these people, if they have a purpose and they have clear direction and they own it, they go for it in amazing ways. They were creative with the service project. We were able to pack over 1,590 school care packs for kids in developing countries. And that was amazing. That only took about 2 hours. And it was a lot of their ingenuity and their drive. They were into it. They loved it. They were motivated to do it. So I feel like they can accomplish so much when they're given a few things. And the only thing that kind of holds them back is sometimes a little lack of self-identity, lack of self-confidence, not being so assured about who they are, what's their significance, what's their purpose. But if we have ways to leverage them to find and experience their significance, their purpose, their confidence will just explode, and the things they can accomplish. This generation, this Gen Z generation, they are incredibly talented. I'm just amazed by what my own kids can do and accomplish and what they're doing. My son and daughter-in-law are now having a coffee trailer ministry that they're starting next week, actually this coming Sunday for the first time. And it's called the Ever House Coffee Ministry. And they're doing it. They're going for it. It's creative, a vintage camper trailer into a coffee making business to help young people and help them grow in their faith, help them grow in leadership, help them grow in learning a new occupation and career. So they've come up with that all on their own.
What are some of the ways that we can help these new adults so they don't feel that they're not part of? On the contrary, how do we make them feel that they are part of? You mentioned a few things. One, ownership. Two, some sort of winning them over a vision of something, creating something that they can get behind that. But if you can maybe identify a few general aspects of that, to kind of have an understanding, and I guess I will say me as a dad of a 23-year-old and now trying to be exposed at a certain somehow to young adults ministry, which is a very new thing to me, which I feel totally that I'm not sure exactly what my place is in it at this point. But what are some of the things that we can help, how we can help these young adults thrive, and how can we encourage them, help them understand that they are wanted, that they are needed, right?
Yes.
And they can be the best at what they do because God created them with those unique gifts. How do we share that? I'm having trouble doing that kind of stuff because I only know how I was raised and the stuff that was said to me or not said to me, right? So we tend to replicate that because that's all we know. I think my generation tends to make a bad thing out of nothing. So, because we were raised one way, and because we were raised one way, that's the way that we want to raise our kids. I'm trying to understand. So it's been challenging, but really understand that aspect of this new adulthood.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, that we need to continually remind this generation of how valuable they are because they question their own value. They're questioning themselves. They're questioning God. One of the fastest growing religions in our country is the nun religion.
Yeah.
And I saw today a poster that said that God loves, and then they were supposed to fill in the blank. And they had sticky notes, and it said God loves, and sticky note said nothing. God loves nothing. God loves everything you hate. I mean, okay, there were some other very positive things as well, but some of those really stuck out to me. That's
wow.
The way that students are thinking. So one of the things that we need to begin with is really listening and questioning and getting below the surface. So listening for several layers of how they're thinking, how they view God, how they view the world. Many of these students have a strong desire for justice and fairness, and we need to listen to that, and we need to harness that, because there's so much that they could do to help the injustices in our world. And as far as young men, one thing that's, I would say, is a little different from many other cultures is that men are not physical with their boys. They're not wrestling and playing with them physically. They're not giving them hugs. One of the things I find myself doing a lot of times is guys that have a good relationship with, we're gonna give hugs, and that may sound silly, but I have learned over the years how much that means to some of the young men, because they haven't gotten hugs from their fathers. They need those hugs regularly. They need the words that say, I love you, I'm proud of you because, and fill in the blank, and give them specific things that you're proud of them for and that you've seen in them. That just gives so much lift to their heart, to their lives, how they feel about themselves. So even as our own family, and we very often greet each other with a hug and say goodbye with a hug. And so that's just me, and that's what I carry onto campus. So yesterday I met a student. He came right up. We hugged. We talked before he left. We hugged again. And I'm just like, I wonder how important a hug is to our young men.
Do they feel weird when you start hugging them? Or the first time that you're like, hey, they probably extend your hand and you just grab their hands and pull them closer to you, right. And then
that's generally what I do after I've gotten to know them for,
of course,
for a time,
Okay. Do they say anything?
No, they really don't.
Do you think they feel awkward or no?
They don't. It doesn't feel awkward.
Okay.
They don't resist it either.
Okay.
They welcome it.
Okay.
They really do.
Okay.
So.
Well, you mentioned that obviously these young adults nowadays, they appeal much to a mission. They're mission-minded generation, right? We can say that. And how do we connect it to the local church? And not just those who are not in the faith, but many of our young adult kids are in that transition or the construction of their faith, or when they were younger, they were just going to church because that's, we will take them to church. But now that they're like young adults, they feel at times they don't even go to church. I know many men that have young adult kids, young adult men, and they don't even go to church. And they may have grown up within a Christian family, and all of a sudden they're older, they're adults, they're in their mid-20s, and they don't go to church. How do we reconnect with these young guys? How do we bring them? What does the church, you think, on your own experience, what does the church needs to do? And when I say the church, I mean the local body of believers, right? Not the church as an organization or as a building, but as an organism. What does the church needs to do to one, serve this young adult generation, and two, how can we reclaim them back into the community of the local church?
The church really needs to give a lot of focus, and they need to maybe even strategize ways to make the young men feel needed and wanted. That's one part of it. I don't know how exactly you do this, but a lot of young men, they don't really know how to be social when they are together with other guys. They don't know really how to interact well.
So where do we start, right?
And so where do you start? I think, again, it might take meeting individually with these young guys to really get to know them, really listen to the things that they fear. It can be, and understand, so you come to church and no one talks to you and you don't talk to anyone. There's things that we can teach them and show them on how to interact with other people. They're not getting that on social media, not in a healthy way.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is it's a double-sided coin, right? Double-edged sword. We have the young adults, when they finally go to church, they don't connect with anybody. One, because they don't go to anybody and say hi. And that's the most awkward thing, right? Even as older men, we have those issues. You see it around. You see people, they just hang in the corners, stand somewhere. They don't go to nobody to say hi. Intentionally, they do not. They don't. It takes somebody else that is very secure of who they are to get to these people and reach out to these people. The young man has nobody to talk to because they won't reach to anybody.
Right. And oftentimes it's a trust issue.
Okay.
It's like they don't trust the other people, but they also don't really trust themselves.
Okay, and that's understandable. But what about the other side of the coin, which is the adults or the older generation? They don't go and introduce themselves to these young men. They don't go and find ways to get to know these kids to make them feel that they're known, right? So I think that our generation is also at fault because we don't go out and reach out to these guys. I see it everywhere. We just don't. In our churches, you don't see older men trying to walk across the room and go and shake a young man's hand and trying to introduce themselves. You don't see that.
You don't see that. And that's unfortunate because
it is.
I saw that growing up. In my church,
Me too.
I had men who would show up at my sporting events, and on Sunday morning, guess what? They would come up, they would talk to me about it. And that meant a lot to me. They didn't have to, but they did. And they often had compliments or things, and they were positive.
Yeah. And
it was some men at the church that even suggested to me as a high school student. One man just said, out of the blue, I think God could use you in full-time ministry sometime. I never forgot that.
Right.
And believe it or not, that became true. I did get into full-time ministry and have been now, like I said, for 30 years. So.
How do we change that, though? What is it going to take? Do we need to go and tell every older man that must be a priority nowadays? Like, how do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we acknowledge the mistakes because we're not aware of? Or how do we pay more attention to the things that are more important in the life of a church body, in the life of a community overall? I think that the most important asset of this country, just to talk about this country, is their kids. That is the most important asset of this country. The kids, the youth. I mean, as a country, we don't even spend the time in help flourish the most important asset, because I don't think we have acknowledged yet that kids and the youth are the most important asset that a country have. How do we start making small steps, small changes as older men? How do we encourage these two older men? Like, what is it going to take? Right? We said that this is a mission-minded generation. Gen Z, millennials, right? What kind of generation are we? You had people that will come to you when you were younger. I had to. What happened along the way? Why our generation is not reaching out to the younger generation?
Yeah, I don't know why it's a miss. I know that there are men of our generation who, for whatever reason, question maybe themselves as a man. They don't know truly who they are as a man.
So this is nothing new?
This is nothing new.
Oh.
And some men are forgetting about who they are. And if I were to say Christian men maybe have forgotten some elements of who they are in Christ. The fact that they are loved, they're forgiven, they're accepted, and they have a purpose. And their life's purpose is to live and bring, glory to the Father. And in that, and having that kind of security, we're not doing a good job of passing that along to the next generation. We're not passing it along well to our boys so that they feel like they understand more fully who they are in Christ.
I found a quote from Socrates from Greece. He even described the folly of youth in ancient Greece. He said, "Youth now loves luxury. They have bad manners, and they are contempt for authority. They don't respect it." This was back in ancient Greece. So this is not nothing new. We can see the circles that every generation goes through. The family has a lot to bring to this generation. It has a lot of weight into how young adults will perform in their 20s. And we have seen broken relationships between men and women, marriages being broken way too often in the last 50 years. Anybody gets divorced for whatever reason, right? Mm-hmm. Who are the ones that have the biggest issue with that divorce and then knowing what happened, that trigger other emotions in these kids or youth. And those are the kids of those broken marriages. So with that, we know that that's probably part of the problem. Missing of a father in the home, even those who live in the home are missing. As you said, dads have to be present. If you're not present, then you're not teaching your boy how to be a man. Mm-hmm. Reality.
Yeah, that needs to be modeled. We had fathers. I had a father in my home. He was there, a lot. He was there every night. He was supportive with things that I was doing. And I don't know if our young people are getting that much support from fathers, mothers. And in some ways it's understandable. There's so many pressures just to live life that we have to do, we have to provide. But we also let sometimes, say, some of our hobbies take us away from family.
Yeah. And I think it's acknowledging what's your most important asset, right? Mm-hmm. What are you leaving behind? For me, legacy is huge. So, and I'm not an expert, far from it. I'm learning how to raise teenagers. I'm learning how to keep raising young adults. I don't know what I don't know. I'm learning. I'm in the process, right? We probably could have a better conversation 10 years from now. But right now, I'm in the midst of it. And I'm learning as much as I can. And I'm making all kinds of mistakes. And I'm sure many are in the same boat. But I think if we are centered on what we consider to be the most important asset in our own family, we're going to try to give as much as we can into that asset. So we can see 15, 20 years from now how that came about. Because nothing happens in a vacuum. It's like everything. You see millionaires, nobody becomes millionaires from one day to another. It takes many years of sacrifice and hard work. Mm-hmm. Raising a child is the same thing. It takes a lot of sacrifices, a lot of hard work, right? And I don't think it's the amount of work that you do in your own trade. I think it's the amount of work that you spend getting to know your child, taking your child wherever your child needs to go, not just paying for transportation, doing family vacations, right? Doing really life, right? Little things like having dinner together, going out once in a while for dinner, everybody in the home or everybody doing something for the house, things like that. I think spending that quality time is more important than working a lot to give your kids what they need. I think that's secondary. So it's the investing aspect of. So you know that 20 years from now, hopefully, you get to hear, "Thank you, you raised me well," or "Thank you, I am who I am because of what you said. I didn't see it then, now I see it. Thank you." I think that's the most beautiful thing that any man can expect to hear from their sons. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, that would be nice. That's for sure.
That will be nice.
Yeah.
That will be nice. Have you heard that yet?
I've heard it a few times, yeah.
Okay. That's
for
beautiful.
sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
I haven't yet. So I still
Okay.
have a long way to go. Don't get me wrong.
But
I mean, I have a 23, a 18, and a 15, really. Like, I'm in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So that's my hope. That's my expectation.
Well, and I like what you're saying about doing things with your family. Having those family times, but also pursuing each one of your children individually. I can't say the importance of that enough as well. But including your family in a much bigger story is extremely valuable. We were in preparation as a family to go overseas as missionaries. One of the things that they found in that the families who stayed together after being on the mission field were the families that included their children in the ministry pretty much wholeheartedly. And we heard that. We said, well, that's what we want. So we did that. So when students would come over, our kids were very young. They had jobs. They were making and serving cookies. They were making the tea. They were bringing it to the students. As a result, they learned to love and enjoy the students.
Yeah.
Students enjoyed them. It helped the ministry. And we come back to the U.S. and all of our students, all of our kids continue to be involved in some type of ministry. And so that's been a huge blessing for us. It's something that we learned, and we're thankful for the advice that we were given, way back when. So,
for us, it happened quite similar. We did church planting for many years back in Miami, and our kids grew up in the church, which was an amazing blessing from God, because I didn't have that. I came to faith way, in my early 20s. So having our kids grow up in the church during our church planting years, they were part of the work. They were part of helping out, bring things out of boxes, putting chairs around, saying hi to people. Like, they were in the grit and knits of the whole organization of it. We've seen, as of now, we have seen the benefits of it. We have. Because I believe that first you work for whatever vision you have, whatever mission you have, you work. And eventually that work brings about the feelings, that mission of that vision that you were trying to helping achieve. Now your feelings come out and the work gets ingrained in you, and you just do it by inertia. I've seen that. It's crazy, right? It's like a muscle, right? It's a muscle. We just keep doing it, and we just don't know why. That's just what we do, right? It's
exactly
just what we do.
Just what we do.
It's like, do you help on this and this and this, and you're part of this, this and this? And I'm like, that's just what we do. That's just what we know. It's just like, we don't think about it. We just roll with it, right? I think it becomes who you are as a family. And hopefully it pays off at the end, 20, 15 years ago, from now. Let me ask you a question.
But there's no guarantee.
No, I know.
And I would say...
And that's tough, though.
Yeah, it is.
That's brutal.
It is tough, because I know families who have done this, have done that, and it has not worked out that way. Their children have grown up to truly question God, question their faith.
Yeah, that's so painful.
And they go after other things, and there's different reasons for it.
Yeah.
But one thing that we've heard and learned that helps reduce some of that is continually explaining the whys behind you're doing things, why you're setting these boundaries or have these rules. Take the time to explain the why behind it. And that offers a lot of security, and your kids grow up with a better understanding, but they grow up with more security in you, in your relationship, and themselves. So,
wow, yeah, I know. It's one of those things that I don't want to think about. I always want to stay and lean on the hope of one day we can see our fruits, even though it's no guarantee. We may not see the fruits of our labor. We may never see it.
That's true. And my work is still ahead of me with grandsons. Mm-hmm. So
exactly.
Starting over.
That's right. Starting over. Well, let me ask you a question. Kind of in closing, if you were to recommend one book, let's think about this, Chuck. If you were to recommend one book, one movie or activity to our listeners that had a very positive impact on your life, what would it be and why?
Well, this book is a good one.
Mm-hmm.
It's called
What book is that?
Meet Generation Z.
Mm-hmm.
And the author is James Emery White. And it's about understanding and reaching the new post-Christian world.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good, insightful information in that book.
Yes, it is.
That's for sure.
Yes, it is. As
far as I would highly recommend with your family to be a part of a bigger story. Find an opportunity where you can serve as a family, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
Whether it's helping after a disaster,
mm-hmm.
helping families, refugees. There's all kinds of needs around the community, and go for it.
And it doesn't have to be affiliated to a church or anything like that.
No, it sure doesn't.
You can do
Not
this
at all.
on your own.
Yeah.
It's being generous.
Yeah.
Of the time that you have, of the provisions that God has given you. Just be generous with what we have. Mm-hmm. And I think, the blessing is in blessing others.
It is. Demonstrating love to another person, and your kids get to actually see the effect it has on that other person. It might be a senior citizen, somebody that needs help, and you're able to step out and help. Those are experiences that our kids will continue to talk about over time. And they will, it's something we want to pass it on to the next generation, right? We want to have servant leaders who do it from a good heart, a pure heart. And they do it because they're free in Christ and they can. So I think that really is an encouragement to our young people.
So in closing, Chuck, tell us a little bit about the ministry that you are involved for our audience to understand exactly a little bit more of this conversation. What exactly are you doing right now in this season?
Right now, I am working with a ministry called Bridges International.
Nonprofit.
It's a part of Cru, which used to be called Campus Crusade for Christ.
Yep.
And I co-lead a team that's in this Colorado metro area. So we're on campuses of the Auraria campus. There's 3 universities there. And I'm also at CU in Boulder. Mm-hmm. We are connecting with and building up believing students that we meet on campus. We're encouraging them. You can be praying for them always. Pray for the students. There is an interest, I would say, in a prayer movement on both of these campuses, these areas. And so I have seen more believing, I would say strong believing students than I have over the past 15 years. I'm actually seeing those and meeting some of those students this year. So that's very encouraging. And we're giving these students opportunities, like I said, to do some service projects, to build and form community with other students. But we have to model and give them opportunities to reach out. They won't do it on their own, but they will do it when we do it with them. And also when they trust us and they are growing in their faith and trust in the Lord. So that is what we're doing among believing students. But we're also reaching out and getting to know a lot of non-believing students. And we're doing that by providing different events and activities that they would be interested in. And the reason they would be interested in some of these events is because it is a way for them to meet and get to know other students. So we strategically do those things to meet and connect with international students, and we're helping them make social connections as well.
So Chuck, so if anybody would like to serve in any capacity, for those who are listening, if you are in the Denver metro area in Colorado, where can they go to find more information about ministry?
They can go to a website called bridgesinternational.com to learn about Bridges International ministry in general.
Is there some sort of calendar there, regional, that people can get some information on it?
There's not a specific calendar there, but if they want more specific information, they could become a follower on our Instagram pages, either Denver Bridges International or Boulder Bridges International.
And we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Chuck, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Rafael. Getting
some time and then sitting here in the podcast. I learn a lot. I hope you do as you're listening to this episode. Thank you again.
You're certainly welcome. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Hey friends, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. And if this content is helpful to you, would you consider rating this episode and subscribe to the podcast? This episode was sponsored by Cyricom Tech, your virtual IT department. Cyricom Tech provides cybersecurity services, cloud services, IT support, infrastructure build, phone systems integrations, and much more. With more than 25 years of experience in the enterprise, Cyricom Tech is here to serve you. You can book a free consultation by calling 720-819-7388. Also on the web at cyricomtech.com. That is SIRECOM tech.com. Until the next episode, God bless you.